It is not the type of program I would ordinarily take delight in welcoming you to. However, if a man who has dedicated his life to serving others, ensuring that he leaves this world better than how he found it, if that man should die in the service he has chosen, in the eyes of the people he is in a sense consecrated forever, and is most certainly deserving of a major honor. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. This is an honored major. For the next 90 minutes, I invite you to watch as we celebrate the life, the work, the ministry, and witness of the late Major Lubin Maxwell.
I remember the day that he was even born. And I remember Dad rushing home to take Mommy, and I had to finish off the soup. Mom used to love a lot of soup. It's no wonder to this day that Charlie's favorite dish is soup. He really loves soup. Even his mother-in-law, he will cook soup for him. But yes, he was born, and as a child, he had a disability. He had a disability, and I can tell you exactly when he grew out of it, but he used to have seizures. And that continued in his early days at Lodge, you know, but he had a sense of determination to succeed, always striving in his studies and whatever aspect at school.
First met Charlie when I went into the law school back in 1979. At that time, Charlie would have been my senior. And typical of the day, juniors and seniors never mixed. But Charlie still stood out because, you know, he was always the sort of person that you would see. If there was something to be done, Charlie would have been there doing it. And interestingly enough, back then, he always tended to be around music. So I was in the school choir, and he used to be assisting the director at the time, who was the Reverend Bernard Griffith, who happens to be a priest. So I guess from back then, he was destined for both church and music.
He always wanted to join the cadets at school, but he was not allowed. I think Mom was thinking of, well, she grew up near the war days and so on, and she's probably thinking, if he joined the soldiers, he has to go to war, and, you know, she don't like that idea too much. Plus, it was the logistics. We don't have transportation, so to get from Lodge home would have been a logistical problem. Anyhow, that was always his love, and I think Dad helped to ingrain that, because every Memorial Day in November, Independence Day, when the police band was having their recitals in Bay Street at the Esplanade, he would always, Daddy loved the military too, to watch it, and he would take all of us. So I think Charlie got a love from then too. We always watched those parades. So he did his best at school. He loved singing. That was one of his love. And I remember Reverend Bernard Griffith was the music master at the Lodge. And he used to facilitate his transportation back home after staying for practice. But he sang for NIFCA, and he got awards at NIFCA too. So, and that was always, he loved music, loved good music.
We never used to mix as juniors and seniors, but somehow Charlie used to find himself with a small group of us that always used to have these heated discussions about music, namely the church choirs. So we had people like Michael Foster, Errol Atwell, who were St. Mary's block. So there was this big argument now between Bentley Callender and St. Mary's, and John Fletcher in the cathedral now, and Charlie, well, we know Charlie was on that side. Poor little me, you know, I was just from the country, say St. Philip's Parish Church and Merton McCarthy, who incidentally ended up at St. Michael's Cathedral. So I suppose from then I was, my own path was being charted. So I came through school, Charlie being my senior. He went into cadets ahead of me, so hence his military influence would have started then. He was always much more dedicated. When you think about it, he and Paul Heinem and Wayne Simmons and those guys were always very, very dedicated. When you see these guys on parade, I mean, they used to be sharp dressers, extremely sharp on parade. For me, I was just interested in the drum corps, so I had my fun there, the little mock wars and that sort of stuff that we had.
I remember his last speech day, he got a prize for deportment, good behavior, and helpfulness. So his commitment throughout life to what he did started from very young. We were brought up that way. He had his chores at home to do. He would get up and do them. I remember his first chore as a little boy was cleaning everybody's shoes on Saturday. And they had to shine. And that went through. If you see him even now, cleaning his cadet boots, he spit on them and he's shining them to the shine. And you can even his wife can sprinkle a little powder around to go on them. He was that meticulous. And that started from his shoes. And then he had his little chores around the house because we kept livestock, cleaning up around the house. And that was ingrained in him from young. Had to tidy his bedroom. That was done. When I went to Scotland for his graduation, the maid in the house of residence, the maid only had to take up his bin. The room was already tidied, spick and span. That was him.
We fast forward a number of years so that Major Maxwell's sister Judy could provide an example of not only the care he gave his personal space, but more importantly, to illustrate his desire to ensure that he did not leave any unnecessary work to be done by anyone, especially when he could do it himself. Now back to his formative years.
An elder brother, Mr. Hudson, who was the organist and also the music master at Harrison College, co-op a few of them into the cathedral choir. So he started going to church, and that would take us down to like the festivals and so on. And the priest asked Dad if he would let him join the little, used to call them court boys. And I remember someone saying they always admired him. He looked like a little cherubim. He looked like a little cherubim. But he continued, and the boys were always the ones to go down to the cathedral. And he was involved in church. Then he became a server. And it grew from there, very committed. Saturday mornings, I remember there was a little old lady at church. She's dead now. And she used to clean the brass and so on at church. And he would get her, and he said he wanted to go along to the cathedral to help clean. So he started from there. I remember saying lime juice was what to clean the brass with. And he would go down and clean and help clean that church in preparation for Sunday. So it started from very young. And he just continued. And that would have been from when he was about 4 or 5 years. And he just continued with it, And when he got a little older, as I said, we didn't have a car. If he missed the bus, he is walking as quickly as he can to get to church on time After school, can't quite remember what happened in there, but we sort of went in different directions. He left here, he got a scholarship to do quantity surveying. And he went off to Scotland, and he went to St. Mary's Cathedral in Edinburgh. And there he became involved and became the head server at Edinburgh Cathedral, at St. Mary's Cathedral in Edinburgh. And everybody loved him. So that when he was graduating, all those people, and they were white people, and Charlie got along with everybody. They provided accommodation for Mom and I. Okay, just no problem, no problem. And he came back.
Before that, I started going to the cathedral for evensongs and for any musical presentations. And of course, as long as there was a major event happening at the cathedral, Charlie had to be there. So I would always see him in his various roles there at the cathedral. In 1994, then I went as acting organist and choir master. So we reconnected back then, and we started working closer in that capacity. Again, I could see the dedication in Charlie from the very, very early days there. Always committed, more so though at that time to the servers, because he was the chief server. So he was the one rallying all of these youngsters now to do their various activities and whatnot around the altar.
There was something about him. I think it was instilled in him. Even the work he did, that is, we used to tell him, you know, this ain't puffy show. You're doing work for God. And he was serious about it.
With a desire to do well at all times, young Major Maxwell knew that it was not a poppy show. The present Dean of the Cathedral is the Very Reverend Canon Dr. Jeffrey Gibson. It was a pleasure to work with Major Maxwell.
Charlie, as we call him, was the affable gentleman who was a sticker for details, who liked things to flow well, who was always immaculately dressed, and who saw to it that the clergy fell in line. As chief server, he also took responsibility for training servers, introducing people to the responsibilities of ministering at the altar. He was diligent in those duties, and whether they were young people or middle-aged people, he took them through their paces, not only providing them with an understanding of the things to be done in terms of movement, reverence, and so on, but he was also able to articulate the meaning and purpose why they were doing what they were doing. He was knowledgeable in the ministry of serving.
As a young man, he was handsome. He was handsome. And, you know, temptations were in his way. But he took heed from Mom's advice, Daddy's advice. And if he fell at any stage, he was one to just get up and go again. Never let anything floor him, you know? So I remember when Dad died, and Dad died, well, not as sudden as him, but in a couple of days. And he was just about to write his final exam. And when Dad died, we are trying to contact him. Can't contact him. Can't contact Charlie at all. And then the phone rang, and my brother said, "Oh, you heard?" He said, "No, I'm catching the flight home." I just felt I couldn't study for my exam. So when we were trying to get him, he was at his professor asking for time to come home, and if possible to do his exams here, final exams at K-Phil. And so he got the news, you know, as it were, but he had like a premonition or something, and he was flying home. So he came home, he sat his exams here, was facilitated at K-Phil, his final exams. And then he started to work in the quantity surveying. A job he loved. He loved his work. He really loved his work, committed to it. And he would do it for any person, you know, even the family, if he had repairs to do anything, just as Charlie, we wanted to do this, and he would come and work with the quants and send us independent quant surveyor to get it ratified so we could go to the bank and so on. He he was always there. He then, after a couple of years, he wanted to do his master's in project management, but majoring in construction and building. And he got a Chevron scholarship. He got a Chevron scholarship and he went off. And he did very well, too. He did very well. He was a person, he could have got jobs elsewhere, but he always wanted to come home and work. The others gave up on getting jobs soon, but he made it his business to come home.
And that was a day that held a great promise for Barbados, for there began the work which so many would later benefit from, not only in terms of what they would gain, but the opportunities he provided to benefactors and philanthropists as together they work for a better Barbados.
When he came home, he joined the Defense Force now as a reserve. Now to cut his love. And he had to practice and so on. And I remember, again, commitment from work. You know, even if he had to go back to work, he was coming to practice here at the Defense Force.
I think I know him best, though, when we were part of a group of people who went on the potential cadet officers course. And there were about 14 of us, 5 females. And we were at Paragon for 2 weeks. This was in April 1994. That was a really great time, and we made some firm friendships. Needless to say, he was not the fittest of the group, but I can tell you, I would say he was the strongest. He had one of the strongest intellect, the biggest heart. He was a supporter of everyone. No matter how you may be falling by the wayside, he would always be there supporting you. He was there if you needed a shoulder to lean on. And this was, whether it was at work, whether, you know, as a friend. I remember many mornings during this 2-week course that we would hear, the females, we would hear the guys singing in the shower. It is one of the best choirs that I've ever heard. I've spoken to a number of those who were on the course at that time, and we all have the same thing to say. He was very humorous. No situation was too bad that he could not lift our spirits. And later on, in 2018, when I started working with him as his 2IC in Support Company Reserves, again, I was reminded of the stature of this man. I've spoken to a number of the support company personnel, some who have already retired and some who are still here. And the words are the same. Approachable at any time. Open door policy. And open door policy doesn't mean weak. It means that I can come, I can say what is wrong, and he will give me a listening ear and he will guide me. And I think that's very important as when you are a leader, when you are a mentor. He was the officer commanding of Support Company Reserve, the first officer commanding of Support Company Reserve, and he was there for a number of years. And he helped those men and women grow to what they are today.
I've had the honor of working with Major Maxwell. He was one of those officers when I returned who took the time to introduce me to the Officers Corps. He is one of those persons who have been, for me, one of the guiding lights in my military career as a member of the Officers Corps. He was an honest person, someone who would speak the truth in love. And at the end of the day, you walked away not feeling in any way demeaned, but you understood where you would have gone wrong and the steps that were necessary to correct it.
The measure of a man can often be seen by a number of different things. His works, and his works were very good. He was organized, he was dedicated, very diligent. He was very, very reliable and responsible. But first and foremost, he was a man of faith. And I think that faith helped him be there for everyone. It doesn't matter whether it was a king, queen, it doesn't matter what rank. He was always there for someone, and he could speak to them easily. He didn't look down on anyone, never spoke down to anyone, and I've never heard him raise his voice. Never. Even in some of the most trying circumstances. And I think that that is all part of the faith which he embodied. And I'm not saying that he was perfect. I'm not saying that he was a saint, but I'm saying that he was a good man and he used his talents for good. Doesn't get much better than that. He would often give of himself. And I'm not saying just of his words, of his knowledge. He also gave financially to those who needed it. They didn't even need to ask. Sometimes he would help them out. And it is very much appreciated. I must say, he loved the finer things in life. He loved the finer things in life. He liked fine food. He liked fine drinks, fine spirits, yes, for sure. And he loved fine clothing. He was always impeccably turned out. He truly was someone to look up to. He also believed that being a leader and being a member of a team, that everyone should be aware of what is going on. And I say that to say that, you know, sometimes as leaders, we keep a lot of information to ourselves and we just give instructions and expect people to follow.
As a professional, he was consistent, competent. He believed in punctuality. He was a teacher. He was supportive of others. He was a listener, and he shared his knowledge with others.
He would explain. He would let the team know this is what is going to be done. And he would put his trust in us and trust that we would do what was necessary. Not saying he would just leave us there. He would follow up, not necessarily looking over your shoulder and micromanaging, but he would give you some advice where you might be falling by the wayside and help you to do the best job possible and help you to grow to be the best person possible. Again, measure of a man. I think across the length and breadth of Barbados, he has helped people, he's done good. With the support company reserve, there are a number of projects that were done.
The construction of the 2 reinforced concrete structures for the Barbados Water Authority. Major Maxwell would have been brought in to look at the design and to project manage this venture. And it was a collaboration between the Barbados Water Authority and Barbados Defense Force. And the one that we actually were in charge of first was in St. George. Major Maxwell probably changed the drawings slightly. And I believe after he did that, the entire drawings for the other 11 were changed to match the design that he would have suggested. And those structures were to house the generators just in case in times of hurricane that we will still have water flowing through our pipes. And there were some projects like that Major Maxwell just said to the chief, sir, we have to go in and perform this duty. And that was it. He had a unique way of doing things and persuading persons to maximize in terms of the structure and save some money. And I believe he will be terribly missed from that field and the collaboration between Defense Force and other partner agencies in government.
Did painting projects across BDF.
We also looked at the redesign of the compressor room here at St. Anne's Fort for the hyperbaric chamber, the redesign and construction of the canteen of the other ranks mess here at St. Anne's Fort and Paragon Base, and redesign of the signal towers here at St. Anne's Fort and the roof to that signal tower.
Painting projects, the Deacon's Primary School.
From nursery to primary, some local schools are being refurbished during the Easter break, and among them is Deacon's Primary. Next term, students will return to a brighter school thanks to the efforts of the Barbados Defense Force. 80 personnel from various arms, including the Coast Guard, Reserves, the Barbados Regiment, and the Cadet Corps, were hard at work from early this morning, giving the school a facelift. Deacon's is a resource center for mass casualty situations during events such as Grand Kadooment and 4-Day Morning. Building Rehabilitation Project Manager with the BDF, Major Lubin Maxwell, tells CBC News they didn't hesitate to act on a call for help from the school's principal.
We worked on being undertaken. That was just to paint the external facade of the building. We're going to be doing some cleaning the windows, and we painting the doors, trying to clean up the grounds, clean some drains, and just in readiness for the next school term.
Painted some senior citizens' homes.
Our first official project was a military assistance to the civil power.
There was a gentleman who's a double amputee who we totally repaired his home, and he was living in some dire circumstances.
We had a site visit, we came back to the office, and within an hour we have 5 designs drawn up. Our initial brief was just to fix one of the bathrooms or provide a bathroom for the double amputee. And his brief to me was to fix the house. We wanted to fix the step to the backyard, the step to the front. We painted the house, and also we fixed the kitchen. He went around calling his suppliers and friends.
Major Maxwell called on all his friends to come and help. And I say this, he had friends all across Barbados in private and public sector, and he would call on them to help a particular situation. In that particular situation, he called on a construction company, and they came and they dug a well free of cost. And, you know, at significant cost to themselves, no doubt. But he was able to ask them, can you help? And they came out and they helped. And he has done this on many projects, which has saved government and others a lot of money.
The day that we were handing over the keys, he sent me to Slumberest to collect a bed so that we could replace the bed within the home. He also fixed the foundations and strengthened the floors of Mr. Ford's house. And when he entered, obviously, Major Maxwell spoke to him and said to him, "This is what I will do for you." I promise you that your house will be good to go.
And that was really what he was about, getting the job done. It wasn't about airs and graces. It wasn't about his own aggrandizement. It was about there's a need, and we can get it done. We can get it done working together. For the members of the support company that did, they said they were willing to work till any time. They worked till 1 or 2 o'clock. That was what I was referring to when I said we'd work till 1 or 2 o'clock. They said, you know, he would come, he'd say, okay, we're working only till 6 o'clock, nightfall, and he would come and he would say a few words and he would smile, that beautiful smile. And as someone said, it would start at one corner of his mouth and then it would just build until it was a total smile. And he would smile and he would be there and he would help and people would work until 1 o'clock in the morning to get the job done.
Major Maxwell had a love for projects that would give back to society, country, and to history. One such project would be the geriatric hospital.
This was to renovate a particular wing down there. When we went there, we had a site visit. We went on top of the roof and we realized that the building needed some love and care, which Major Maxwell would honestly give to those buildings. We repaired all the ceilings, the roof, the floors. We did some painting. We did also renovations to the bathrooms, tiling. There's a whole load of stuff that we did down there, including the handrails, making sure that we preserved them and painted them as well.
And everyone was impressed with the work that we were doing. And he said, you know what? It may not be a part of our job, but these trees need trimming, the road needs paving, and it would heighten the sense. And that's what Major Maxwell did. He made 2 phone calls, and in less than an hour, the road was being paved, people were cutting trees, and these things were not a part of what we were supposed to do, but he understood that it was a part of the element.
Totally transformed the look of the place. And I think the work that was done there made a huge difference to the patients there. And he always had a smile, a joke, a good word to speak to everyone there. And he was very well liked.
Major Maxwell was fond of the team. I was always impressed in the way that he spoke to us, he spoke with us. He always respected people. He spoke to you and you felt that you mattered. And there were many times we spent between sites and driving between sites. We would strike up small conversations.
He had this ability to get persons to work, and that team down there would come to work every day, and you will think that Major Maxwell was the boss down there, because their supervisors could tell them, oh, I wait until Major Maxwell give me instruction.
He believed that things could get done. He was a doer. He wasn't a complainer. So no matter how complex the job, he would sit down, work with his team, try to simplify it and get it done. Again, that is something that I really appreciated. I love when, you know, I love can-do. I love can-do people. Even when things are bad and things are down and we have to knock our heads a bit. And I love when we can get up and say, well, look, we can do it. He could always look for another angle, and he would bring everybody in to find out what other angles there were. It wasn't just about me, the leader. It was about us, the team. He could speak on virtually any topic. So it's always a joy to come into his office, or anywhere for that matter, and sit and talk with him. When you came to speak to him for 5 minutes, whether it was work-wise or you had a problem, you often ended up there for a couple of hours. And I can tell you that all these projects that he worked on, all these projects that support company worked on, if it was that you were supposed to be working 5 hours on a particular day on the project, if he came and said, well, you know, maybe we need to work a little longer, 3 more hours could be spent, or we would work till midnight, till 1 o'clock, whatever it took to get the job done. He was also a perfectionist. So if there was a report to be written, he would write it, he would return to it, and he was an eloquent speaker and writer. So he would work on it until he got it right, until we got it right, if it was a group project. But this did not make him a stiff or unapproachable person.
I remember he was about planning to sit an exam, and they had, the soldiers had to walk planks as an exercise. And he was doing that and felt he was good and everything. The evening of the exam, he fell, and he hurt his foot. And he had seen the doctor too, and I think everybody assumed it was a sprain. Anyhow, a couple of days after, I'm a physiotherapist, and he came with the boys in the Defense Force gym. He said, Judy, cut my ankle for me. So when I saw it was more than a sprain. And when he took off his boot, of course, he couldn't get it back on. And there was he, still, you know, hopping. A soldier never succumbs. A soldier never succumbs. You know, I thought, well, you play with that foot. And I called the orthopedic surgeon, and he saw him the Saturday morning. Remember, bell went up, and as soon as the consultant saw him, he said, you have a fracture. And it was a serious fracture too, right by the nerve. So he was supposed to be off work. That time he was doing his own work too, doing his own business, and he was in charge of building the accommodation down Sunset Crest, Royal Westmoreland. That's where he worked for a number of years. He was the main contractor down there. And he went on his crutches, and he was still on the job. Yes. So he plodded on, you know.
While he loved Barbados and was resolved to give back to his island, there was an opportunity for him to fly the flag of Barbados abroad, and so touched the lives of those residing in other islands with his special blend of charity.
So he got a job. He worked with some UN agency in Dominica, building their landfill. And so he went on for a number of years, and he was affiliated with their defense force. And they got him to be in charge of their defense force band. There he was involved in the church. There he always went to his church. And they didn't have any priests down there. And Bishop, I think it was Bishop Brooks, who was bishop of that area at that time, found out who he was and supported him. And it's he that made him a Eucharistic minister in Dominica. And then he conducted his services. He took his work seriously. And then he gave the homilies.
He shared great joy when he was given the right by the bishop of that province to conduct a funeral service. Charlie called. Charlie said, Jerome, I'm doing my funeral tomorrow. But so in tune he was that his sermons were always well prepared.
He sent here for some books and everything, and he prepared his sermons for Sundays.
He paid great attention anytime he was giving a sermon. I recall Palm Sunday was coming up, and he said, Jerome, I want to do a performance of the Passion Gospel. I think that you should come to Dominica and sing it with me. And there I am, in Dominica for the weekend, in robes, and everybody's walking past Charlie saying, good morning, Father. Good morning, Father. And I would always tease them and say, so why you don't join the priesthood? There isn't anything that you don't know about it. I mean, just go and get the certificate. He said, it isn't my calling as yet.
I left in 95 to study, and obviously on my return, you know, we would always get together and stuff. But then I came back then in 99, and I think it was once I came back and I was here that, you know, our bond got even closer. To the extent then that Charlie himself left, he had some overseas assignments, and I became like a musketeer following him along on these assignments. Interestingly enough, again, although his assignment may have been in construction, building, or something of the sort, wherever Charlie went, he found himself a church home. Always, there was always a church he found as home. And once he got involved in the church, there was no stopping him. He would work as if it was his home church right here in Barbados.
He had a great love for God. Above everything else, he loved God. And he lived in Dominica for a while. And I made quite a few trips down there. And that's the first time I realized he had culinary skills. So here it is that he prepared veg rice, baked chicken, tossed salad, and was able to make 5-finger juice. Don't know where these skills came from, but yeah, he could have cooked.
So when he was in Dominica, the island had been ravaged, and I honestly can't remember which hurricane it was. And we're talking just prior to 2004. He saw the need for St. George's Church there. They had been devastated by the hurricane and were trying to rebuild. And he wanted to do something to help the church. And he had this idea of being able to do a concert. So on one of his trips back, and it may have been around Easter time, when he was back here in Barbados, a couple of us met with him. Can't call the place because they didn't pay me for advertising. And we came up with a list of 16 singers that could possibly go to Dominica and do this performance. And that gave birth to the Myriad Singers. So that was Charlie's baby. He was both mother and father of the group. We just happened to, you know, be there when it was born.
But he was a great guy. His love for music was so great that he always sought to enrich the lives of others who weren't privileged enough to see live concerts of major choirs. And when he moved to Dominica, the forming of the Myriad Singers was big for him because he wanted those persons to have what he called a cathedral experience. So we performed, I think it was in October of 2004. Myriad Singers performed there, and it was the talk of the town once the performance was over.
And from then, he's always played a very integral role in whatever the group was doing.
So when he came back here, he had appreciations and medals. He was honored twice by the Defense Force down there. And he brought back, you know, awards from the church. They loved him. Okay, they really loved him.
That was Dominica. We went down. We had a really good time. It was just a weekend visit. But everyone seemed to gel so much out of that visit that they wanted to stay together. And the following year, he arranged another tour, which this time went to St. George's Cathedral in Guyana. Unfortunately, he couldn't make that tour with us, but he was there in spirit. I mean, we were always in contact. And I mean, again, it was a church, and it showed that he was a very generous chap to me. Always had a very big heart, always trying to help wherever he possibly could.
He always wanted Myriad Singers to travel. And he felt that we should be doing lots of tours. He actually wanted to be touring every year. He would always say, Jerome, this is the best group in the world, you know. So in 2012, we went on tour to New York and South Carolina. And we ended up doing an import-through performance in St. John the Divine. And there Charlie is, not a chorister, but sitting in the stalls. And they carry this Gothic look. And Charlie was telling himself, yeah, this is me. This is what I want. And you could hear him singing the hymn and trying to out-sing the choir. He loved descants. And he also loved a bit of competition with the guys once a unison verse came up. It's only obvious that we would try to out-sing the organ, which is a difficult job to do at times. But those moments will be missed.
So eventually he came back home and he worked with DLN, and they had a project in Montserrat, you know. So he worked down there and again involved. And he was actually down there when the volcano erupted. He was down there then. And again, he was involved in the church. He became involved with their defense force too. So they sent us condolences and sent a picture of him working down there.
I remember then when he went over to Montserrat, we had a similar thing, and you know, I would get him one day for that Montserrat thing. That was, well, those used to be some of the scariest trips of my life to Montserrat. If you have ever been in there, those plane rides, no joke about them. But I always had a good time. It was always very, very, very welcoming. And it was amazing how Charlie could have just gone to these countries, you know. He wasn't born there, but everyone knew Charlie. You know, you would be in the car driving along, Maxwell, you know, everyone cheering him on like if the king or something was coming. And the thing is that he never asked for it. He never asked for the popularity and the publicity, but somehow or the other, it was just accorded to him because of who he was.
Anyhow, he eventually came back home. He resumed being on the reserves here.
Major Maxwell and I served as officers commanding reserve elements of the Barbados Defense Force, sometimes called the General Services Unit or the Technical Support Reserve. These are the non-infantry side of the Barbados Regiment Reserves. He commanded the General Services Unit. I was in charge of the Barbados Defense Force Band. And so we kind of worked as OCs, officers commanding together. I served from 2000 until about 2008. Took a little break, and when I returned in 2011, I think it was, Major Maxwell had taken over as the administrative officer of the Barbados Defence Force Band.
He was fondly known as the band director, Major Maxwell.
The director of music takes charge of the musical aspects, but the administrative officer makes sure that all of the arrangements surrounding the various band engagements are in place. He doesn't necessarily have to attend the band engagements just to make sure everything is lined up, transport, the location is good, but Major Maxwell attended every single band engagement. Such was the nature of the man. That's the kind of dedication that he always exuded. There was a point just before my return when he was actually somewhat almost in charge of the band itself. You may not know that Major Maxwell has a pretty musical side. Those of you who have the pleasure of visiting the cathedral would see him performing his various roles as MC and whatever else.
He shared great love for the military, and somewhere in there, church and military fused.
I think one of his major influences at the cathedral may have been Dean Harold Critchlow. I think in a lot of ways, Harold mentored him, and probably because of Harold's own quiet disposition, you know, quiet demeanor and everything, but can still get things done, Charlie in a lot of ways sort of resemble that. And I think Charlie would tell you himself that he owes a lot to Harold's mentorship in there. And that's probably when he got started singing the offices in the cathedral. So here again, he was back into music in the cathedral. Of course, being in the stalls for the services, he and the other guys in the choir would have their own bit of fun, matins and evensong, singing away like if they were in the greatest choirs in the world. I think Charlie always fancied himself to be some sort of a musician. Now, that can be questioned, but I leave that up to someone else.
But you may not know that he has a wonderful singing voice. And I recently saw a clip of him attempting to play the organ, and it was not a bad attempt.
There was a little video that was going around in recent times that made me wonder if he wasn't trying to take my job, sitting at the cathedral organ, playing and stuff. And he looked like he knew what he was doing, you know. It's questionable, but yeah, and there's Charlie, I mean.
He loved organ music. He was never taught music, but he bought an organ. He had 2 organs in his life. And he played by ear. The very last one was here recently before the ordination. somebody snapped a picture of him at the cathedral organ, you know, and it was cut on the ears, and he looked up and he smiled. But he just had a knack to go and sit down and play at the organ, okay? And, you know, well, and that was, I'm telling you something, that was how he vented his stress. That's how he vented his stress. He would either listen to music, okay, or he would go and play on the organ. That's how he vented his stress, you know? Yeah, he loved the music. He liked instrumental music. Yes, Wayne Marshall. Okay, he loved Wayne Marshall, to him Wayne Marshall playing, you know? And as I say, any religious, you know, music, that was his forte. And it became more so as he got older. And as a young man, yes, with some other music, you know. I remember him singing one of the ones I stood to mind that he sang for NIFCA was the Banana Man. The Banana Man, you know. And that was just his love for music.
So he does have some experience, some background in the musical arena, and he was able to keep the band going really, really strongly. And then, of course, when I returned in 2011, we worked very closely together. Now, Major Maxwell is very much a hands-on sort of person. You know, he likes to be involved.
I also worked with him because he was the head of the building rehabilitation project management team at the Barbados Defense Force, so we worked together a lot. In recent times, I actually joined his team in 2018, and I worked closely with him from then to present. Major Maxwell was truly a gentleman. He had a joy for his job and the people he worked with.
So we worked very, very closely in that regard. And I must tell you, it was a genuine pleasure to work with Major Maxwell. He is someone who is totally committed to the task. He is very able to motivate people and to get things done.
He also was one of those persons that you could always be sure that he would get the job done. He also had a very high standard, whether it be personal or professional standard. And being around him, you will get that you inherit that standard from him.
As you would be well aware, he was responsible for a lot of the building work that you see around St. Anne's Fort. And in fact, I recall when I left, when I took my break from the band, we operated from a rickety old building called Hodgson Hall. And when I returned a few years later, it was transformed into this wonderful structure that was pretty much 21st century ready, you know. And what was unique about it is that it retained a lot of the character of the old building, but gave it a fresh new look. And I thought that was almost a stroke of genius. And I'm fairly certain that a lot of that work was Major Maxwell's design.
In recent times, I actually joined his team in 2018, and I worked closely with him from then to present. Major Maxwell was truly a gentleman. He had a joy for his job and the people he worked with. He also was one of those persons that you could always be sure that he would get the job done. He also had a very high standard, whether it be personal or professional standard. And being around him, you will get that you inherit that standard from him. So the last year and a half, almost 2 years, working directly with Major Maxwell, we became very close. We worked on numerous projects together, and we spent a lot of time on the job and off the job together in between job sites. I fondly remember Major Maxwell always saying, you know, it looks good, it's done right, but there's still more we could do. He always had a flair for the small things. For instance,
recently, when my cousin was going to be enthroned,
as the cathedral looked forward to that moment, we looked around and discovered that there was a need to make some significant improvement in the physical setting of the cathedral. And on the first weekend in January, we discovered that we had what appeared to be a minor challenge with the woodwork. And the floor was a major concern, though, with the carpet. And I asked Major Maxwell to take a look at the woodwork and see what we could do to almost put on a good face for the occasion. And on that Saturday morning, Major Maxwell said, no, this is a major problem. It looks like termites. And between that Saturday morning and Monday morning, the next Monday morning, he had done his assessment.
Because Charlie was the one that would see about the outside being clean and brushing up the walls and all that type of thing. But the floor of the cathedral was in bad shape, okay? And he sought to see how he can facilitate this thing. And I remember he got the permission of the chief of staff here to help.
And some major work went on in the cathedral church. A section of the balcony had to remove because of termite infestation. Major Maxwell had everything in place so that by the Monday afternoon, the carpenters could start working, having removed the termite nest and remove the rotten wood. Everything was set in place for work to be done, with a finish line being set for the last week in January. Simultaneously, work was started on the floor. We discovered the floor was undulating, and with the assistance of a carefully selected individual who had the skills in working with flooring and relaying of tiles and so on, Charlie managed the entire project. And on some occasions, he would be there as early as 7:30 in the morning, and he would leave as late as 11 o'clock to ensure that the workers were able to perform their tasks with all the necessary support from the cathedral. Additional lighting would have been brought in. Whatever was required to make things work, Major Maxwell facilitated it. And the cathedral was able to achieve a remarkable feat of relaying a significant section of the floor, repairing a section of the balcony. It virtually happened in 4 weeks.
He worked day and night to see that that was done. When that was finished, there was a cleaning. And the cleaners were doing it in shifts throughout the night. And he never left that cathedral. He never left that cathedral. I said, well, you are the real doorkeeper of the church. You are the doorkeeper. Everybody's gone home and he's sleeping in there and with the workers. Okay? He just wanted to see things were done to the best that they can be.
So that on the eve of the enthronement service, many hearts were relieved because there was a new look cathedral. And it looked far different from the mortar and bricks and broken wood of 4 weeks earlier. That's where Charlie's skill as an engineer and a project manager came in. He offered it voluntarily and devoted the same diligence and care for detail as if he was arranging for a service of matins, a service of evensong, an ordination service, or a synod service.
I remember even here with building the monument for the 50th anniversary, I will never forget that. You know, it came in late and still had to be finished on time. Rain falling, and he's still going after it. Put up floodlights out at the garrison, and they're working through the night. You know? I remember Richard Bullhagen, he was on that committee, and he would call me and say, I'm concerned about Charlie. He's working so hard. And he would wonder if this thing had come to fruition, just praying. He said when he went home, he would just be thinking about Charlie and this monument. And he said when it came through, he had to thank the Lord for him, you know, because he was wondering how he's going to get through. But he just had this determination and always strove for excellence. That was him. That was him. That was him. Work. And in anything he put his hand to do, you know. As a member of the family, his niece in England summed it up. After a few days, she got the courage to write. She said, Auntie Judy, I am still numb and in shock. And she said, my beloved uncle, a beloved brother, the baby of the family, but the glue of the family. He was there for everyone. And that summed it up. And all of them sent in their sentiments. You know, all of them sent in their sentiments. I remember when they were small, I think he is one person who never, if he saw something, a need, he was going to offer help. He don't wait till you come begging. You know? When my sister had the problems, and he would leave home in St. James and go up to Christ Church and take them to school. He would take them to school, all right? When they left here, he accompanied them up to the States. Whenever they were relocating, Charlie took a flight up and helped them up to 2 years ago, he went up to help my sister relocate. You know? He was just there, and it wasn't an asking and a begging. He offered. And when he tried to do things, he did things to the best of his ability. He just did things. He was always there. He was always at Mommy's beck and call.
Family meant a lot to him, and he got married, and that became the joy of his heart, Mitchell.
So he had a very loving relationship with his wife. There were times that we were in the car and he called or she called, and the way that they spoke to each other was remarkable. Something that I strive for with my wife. They were very loving and caring to each other.
And he would always say, Jerome, I love my wife. I love my wife.
Many people called him Charlie, but he was Lubin to me. We actually met by accident. And it was early in the morning. There was a person who was actually injured, and we ran to the area to see exactly how we could help. And when I got there with my sister, Julia, we saw him there. And I remember he didn't really take me on because I was just with my head tied and looking very much in the morning. But we spoke, and a couple days later, I was at the cathedral, his cathedral, as I was responsible for the preparations for our Founders Day service, because at that time, I was at the St. Michael's School. And I saw him again, and he was at the lectern. And I think I asked a question, and he readily came over to assist me, and we spoke. And I think he asked me about my number. And I said, yes, I knew he was going to ask me for my number, because at that time I had cleaned up as compared to the morning of the accident. And that led to us having what would have been a wonderful life together as husband and wife, because we met in his cathedral, and that really did it in for me, because I recognized that he was very much a person who loved God and loved serving God and being very much a part of his cathedral. So much so that there was no getting in between him and his cathedral. He was very meticulous, very devoted to any task that he was assigned, as he sought to ensure that whatever was happening there was at its very best, and that he could give his very best. He was the epitome of service, and service to God, loving his family, being a good husband, a good provider. He was, funny enough, a very reserved person, even though he was very much out there in the limelight and giving of his all. He didn't really talk a lot, but there was that ever-present embracing smile, as well as those piercing eyes that somehow could get to the very depth of your soul. A very humble person. And he really, really loved God and family. I remember that he reflected a lot on, as he was very much a part of my family, that we got together every Sunday to have family lunch. And that happened after church. We would come together around the table, and what would start out as lunch from around 1 p.m. extended until about 6 or 7 in the evening, and everything was discussed at the table. Sharing, reflecting on the past week with friends and family. Oftentimes there was robust discussion as to what was happening on the political scenes, but it was always that sense of togetherness, loving and sharing, and enjoying good food and fellowship. Saturdays was special for us because after a hectic week, I would say to him, it's downtime. And we would go to have breakfast. Sometimes it would end up with us just exploring maybe a hardware store. And then he would say, okay, honey, I'm going to take you on a drive. Simple things, beautiful things, but lasting memories. And I will miss that we shared many good days together. He would often say to me, honey, I am operating off your energy. And I would say, that is so funny. So that the morning that I got up and I was very purposeful in getting on with the day and the business of the day, Lubin would be up and he would be working with my time. And the morning that I decided to lay back and just be so relaxed, my husband would do likewise. And he would always say to me, honey, you know I operate because of your energy. He was so diplomatic and dignified. He never got into anything. He didn't like arguing. And he didn't make a fuss about anything. He was very meticulous, and that had a lot to do with his training in the Barbados Defense Force. He was passionate about his, being here and being able to contribute, and that extended to his contribution for love of country. Whenever he was given a task, he sought to ensure that the very best was given as far as the quality of the work that went into that particular assignment. So much so that my husband would work day and night, sun and rain. Light by its natural presence or improvised light to ensure that the task was completed. He gave his very best to any assignment that he was given. And that also extended in the church as well. His last efforts were seen in the ordination of Michael Walcott and Rosalind Harper Johnson. And once again, he would take the order of service and he would sit at the table and he would meticulously go through every single part of the order of service, and he would write the movement, who was going to be here, what should happen at this point. He was a repository of intense and great knowledge of the cathedral, his cathedral, and that everything had to line up. He was very much into High Mass, the liturgy. So for him, it was absolutely important that everything ran smoothly. And of course, I had to be in on it. Again, to the point where I knew what was supposed to happen at any event for which he was a part of, because he was so meticulous. And we talked about things, and he would rely on me, and he would say, "Hun, how was that? How did that sound? Is that going to work?" Because as devout Anglicans and very much in the church and serving God and loving God, we always want, and he always wanted to ensure that it was the very best for God. He was very passionate about music and ministry. And somehow he thought that he understood the complexities and the majesty of the organ. But he was not, what should I say, extremely talented in exploring the abilities to play. But somehow, mentally, he thought that there was great ability. I remember oftentimes we have piano keyboard at home, and Lubin would be on this piano keyboard, and he would be doing all kinds of movementations, and he would be playing. But he oftentimes forgot that there were programmed elements in the in the instrument. So you would hear all these different things happening in the background with the music, and he was just in his element. Or at times when he listened to Wayne Marshall, the accomplished organist, he would pretend, and I could hear him now, boom, 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 he was playing and he was just in his element, because that brought much comfort. And that extended to his love for Washington Cathedral. That became a staple in our home. Since COVID, he would explore the YouTube, and he would line up the services one by one by one. On Saturday nights, it was Perth, Australia, and we had to oftentimes he would lie in bed and listen to the service, and he was very contented that his wife was a part of that experience. And then we would listen to Washington Cathedral. We would listen to the service that would be a part of the Anglican Diocese of Barbados. And we would listen to services throughout the day. And this is, as I said, since we've had COVID-19. But passionate about church, loving God, serving. Very given to country. I remember when I met him, he was lieutenant. And I said to him, we're going to work towards you now, move into the next rank. And we did. I was with him when he was elevated to captain. And he was so excited about that. And as usual, the family would have toasted and, you know, they've been very, very supportive of him throughout his time here at the Barbados Defense Force and what he would have been able to achieve. And then I said, so we're going to move to the next level, Major. And he was happy to do that and to work towards that. So much so that when we traveled in December, the December of that year when he was coming up for exams, I was out shopping, but I was in the mall, but he was in the hotel, sitting and going through, preparing for his examinations for elevation with regard to his rank. And I remember coming back to Barbados with him, and we had to go off to explore a number of elements, played out scenarios, and he took me with him. And we spent the entire day over on the eastern side of the island. Harry Smith Point, we went Bottom Bay. We were all over, map reading. I was by his side, and we had such a wonderful time exploring, trying to help him figure out the different points and, you know, preparing him for his exams. So when he was elevated to Major, that was another wonderful achievement. And I was happy to be by his side and to support him.
Major Maxwell's widow Mitchell would be back shortly. Meanwhile, his colleagues sum up the man and his work.
We were all at a loss for words when we heard that he had passed. He had more to give, and we were all willing, if asked, to work to get any project done.
He contributed to my further growth and development as I transitioned to his department. First and foremost, Major Maxwell was a gentleman. He had Christian values. He had a big heart. He was kind, he was loyal, and he was giving.
He was an officer and a gentleman, and I don't think I've ever met another officer who so well epitomized that. And everyone that I spoke to have said those same words. He was an officer and a gentleman. He was a real professional, and he still had so much more work to do. But I think he definitely has a legacy that will live on for a very, very long time. Whether it is in some of the unfinished projects that will go on to be finished and finished well because he put really good plans in place, or across at the officers' mess in what we know as Charlie's Pit. I don't think we'll ever forget that. I think we should name it in his honor. He really was a really great guy, and he'll be sorely missed.
Major Maxwell have given me something that I truly value and I'm thankful for, the knowledge and the experience. He truly was the best boss ever.
He was one that left a strong legacy. If you ever get a chance to speak to any of the band members, especially during that time when he was pretty much responsible for their welfare, they will tell you he was personally involved in their welfare, in looking after them, in keeping them motivated, and that is the kind of leader he was. There are many officers around, and not all are good leaders, but when you get the combination of a good officer and good leadership in one person, you've got a gem, and that was Lubin A.R. Charlie Maxwell. It was really, genuinely a pleasure to work with Charlie, and I can tell you he will be sorely missed.
There's so much to say, so many memories that I will have of Charlie, and as time goes on and we talk more with one another, the memories will come out, and I keep saying we live as long as we have friends and our friends have memories. So he will live for a long time because we will definitely be talking about him. Definitely be talking about him. So he will be with us for a long time.
And you'll miss him dearly.
I will certainly miss my husband. I think that because we've had such good memories, we've had such wonderful experiences, it will help me to get through day by day. I will miss the times that we would sit at the table with family and friends over a good meal and share much laughter. And I will certainly miss seeing him walk up the cathedral aisle because he was so at home. He was so at home. But I'm happy. I'm comforted in knowing that he played such a significant part in the restoration of significant buildings in Barbados, that he contributed to the life of the church, the Anglican Church. Really good memories. Really, really good memories of my husband. And I will certainly miss him. Honey, he always said, honey, that was him. And he would often say, once my wife is pleased, I'm happy. He always sought to ensure that I was happy. And I thank God for giving me the opportunity to have been his wife and to have loved him, and he loved me. And for the beautiful memories and experiences that we had. I'm thankful.
And we are also thankful that Major Lubin Maxwell has today left his space and his environment better than how he found it. He has now become a touchstone. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Thanks for your time.